Orestis, is there any difference, or should be there any difference between, for the performance measurement between industry and university, academia?
Yes, of course. I mean, universities are different, and research organizations are different from industrial companies. That's obvious. They've got a different setup, they've got a different DNA, so to say. They've got different goals, they've got different people. Yeah, and of course, obviously, they do have different functions. I mean, there is no or almost no such thing in a university as sales. You do have some marketing, you do have some corporate identity, some positioning and things like that. But are you selling really? Not really. I mean, if you sell something, you sell potentially your skill profile or your attractiveness as a place for students. Yes, and potentially intellectual property, but there is no professional sales organization in a proper sense, or at least the proportion is very small, to put it that way. Don't want to exclude it's there a little bit. And with that background, of course, it's different. And university is a place where you, first of all, do research and teaching. And then, of course, at least I think in the modern understanding or postmodern understanding, you want to also support innovation and drive innovation. So performance is, of course, important in this context, yeah, that's clear. But it is sometimes very difficult to measure it, even to define it. And sometimes you even have situations where it's counterproductive for the performance to do that, culturally, because universities are more liberal in a way. They're more decentral, they don't want to have so much control, and they rather want to have that creative, undefined space in which they work. So it's a very difficult environment, not difficult, I'm sorry, a very different environment from a corporate environment. That's clear. In a corporation you must have clearer targets where you say what you do. But I think implicitly researchers and scientists know very well if something interesting is done in their research. And they do have a very, maybe less explicit, but a very clear implicit understanding of quality and things like that. And then of course there's this entire, publication ranking and so on thing. But again, there are different attitudes and opinions in the room, how you really want to live with that and go about that.
Okay, thank you. What is the main KPI for startups? Or let me rephrase this. What is important for KPIs to become successful?
Well, I think the relevant question is really what is important for you to do as a startup. And it's interesting that the thinking today is rather to say the main goal that you have as a startup, at least in the first phase, is basically to learn, and in particular to learn what is right, what is the right thing that you want to do. So performance in that way is to learn quickly. It's different from a mature company, of course, has to be productive. They create value for somebody. If you go to a restaurant, you want to have a good meal, and you want to have it not, it should be sort of quickly, and you want it to be clean and things like that. So that's clear performance criteria. While if you're in a startup mode, you don't really know what you will serve, what you will put on the menu. So that's the thing that you want to do. And then of course it's best to learn that as quickly as possible. So take the example of a team. That's one of the reasons why startups may fail, that the team is not cooperating in a good way. But then there are, of course, also things that are much more tangible, and you can really measure that. For instance, if you've got a web startup, an internet startup, they've got very clear ways of analyzing, for instance, if somebody comes to a landing page, how long will he stay there, he or she, how high is the probability that the user, the visitor, will go to the next step, what is the conversion rate, how much time does it take, and many more things that you can measure very, very precisely. And teams do that in the internet space. Or another very tangible performance field, I would say. Yeah, it's not yet a KPI, but it's a performance field, is of course how you do sales. Yeah, so that depends very much on the nature of the business you're in. That's very different if you're in a B2C business and a B2B business. But there are schema how you can do that in each of these fields. And then other KPIs are related to product development. Have you met your goals? But I think what is very important, especially in startups, and I guess in all innovation projects, also in big corporations, it's to understand that it is a lot about effectiveness, not so much about efficiency. It's not about throughput KPIs or something like that. It is, am I doing the right thing? And now this is something that is very important, but sometimes very difficult to measure.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for this. Maybe one last question. What is new, or what was your key learning today in this workshop? Was there anything that you heard, something new for you, or it made a new connection?
Yes, there were, I think, a couple of things. First of all, it was the density and the comprehensiveness of the talks, both of the representative of the Commission and of Ferry from Philips, that created a very dense picture of things that maybe I knew in one way or the other, but suddenly brought it together. And I think it reaffirmed a couple of things that I believe are very important, like the fact that research basically creates options for the future. And the difficulty is to really give value to these options. So you have an option, it's like an option, a real option on a financial market, right? Like the option that I buy now in November for a ton of wheat or for a barrel of oil in June, let's say, next year. Now, this option itself has got a value. And the value for these real options are determined in markets. So there's no objective way, it's just how much do I bid, how much do you bid, what is our collective impression where these things will go. Here you don't have a market to really evaluate that. Or, let's put it that way, that could be a line of thought of how you could give value to them, to create an internal market within an enterprise, within Philips, and say, okay, they've created this thing. All employees, please judge it. How much money would you put in that? We play a game. We bet on it. And the guys that win an iPad or whatever, or a tablet PC, So people have experimented with these things. That could be a way of going about it. But that's basically the problem. How much I created an option, I created a prototype. I'm aware I need to do an investment in order to make the prototype a real product. Like I need to do the investment to buy the barrel of oil. The only thing that I bought is I buy it for a fixed price. It's exactly $100. It's $110, I still buy it for $100. And that's the same thing here. You created an option, and in fact what a research organization does, an industrial research organization, it creates a portfolio of options. If they do open innovation, they extend the options. by taking in others, or they may give options to the outside world, yeah? Both ways, inside out, outside in. And I think that thinking was reaffirmed. And a new thought was really one that is maybe difficult to articulate now, but that probably we've gone into a shift over the past 100 years or so in economy, where 100 years or maybe even 50 years ago still, the boundaries of a company were defined by the transaction costs. While today it could be, at least it's an hypothesis that I think is interesting and worth to be explored, that today the boundaries of the firm are defined by the cost of innovation. And that's, I think, a very interesting thought.